All right, you guys, welcome to National Airspace. We are here at beautiful Fullerton Airport this afternoon, and we are going to be teaching you National Airspace. So just getting to understand National Airspace. Here's our target skill form. You should have already received it, or you can go to the link and find it. And these target skills, why do I issue these target skills? These target skills are specific questions geared towards this area that a DPE or a designated pilot examiner is going to ask you during your private pilot license exam. The nice thing is after each of these sections, you're going to save these, have them all saved up. And then after that, when you're getting ready for your exam, you're going to have all these great questions that are going to be there for you that somebody can ask you so you can answer those questions. So you just kind of use them as flashcards that these are potential questions that a DPE can ask you at the end during your, during your oral portion of your flight exam. So that's kind of nice. You have that ready to go. And so you already have a great study tool for your private pilot license exam. The next thing is just that memory aid. That memory aid is super helpful. It only takes 15 minutes, if that, to memorize. And then your pre-lesson assignments, we have those set for you, and those will help you if you kind of review those before we start. That would be a huge help. So, all right, let's get started. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the different altitudes that are going to be assigned to these airspaces. So you have your class A, which is at the top. So let's start from the top down. You have your class A, which is basically they're going to assign this as a flight level. So class A is flight level 18. It's from 18,000 MSL up to flight level 600. So so those are going to be all assigned in a flight level. The next airspace you have is class B, C, and D, and those are all going to be MSL or main sea level. And then you have your class Gulf, which is going to be above ground level or AGL. So just kind of understanding that these different airspaces are going to have different assignments in regards to their altitudes. So it's once you start doing it, it's going to make sense, but just understand that those are the different altitudes we're going to be using in your different airspaces. So these are just easy ways to remember our different airspace. You have your class A, which is really high. It's the highest, the top of the class. Just remember like A for top of the class. It's above 18,000 feet. You have your class B, B for busy. That's the busiest airspace. I know this is tough. Some of people don't understand this, but Ron Burgundy from Anchorman, the movie. If you haven't seen it, go see. You know what? Here's your assignment. Go see Anchorman, the movie, and then Class Charlie. My analogy is going to make sense. So I know it's going to be like a 2-hour homework assignment. It's a great movie. It's pretty funny. 2-hour homework assignment just to remember something, but go write it. But anyways, if you do understand what I'm saying, is stay classy, San Diego. Class C, and always think of Ron Burgundy, and it's magenta, which is kind of burgundy colored. So that's how I remember it. But if you never watched the movie, then I don't know. You don't even know what I'm talking about. So go watch the movie. And then your class D is class donut. D for donut. They're round. Class delta is like perfectly round almost all the time. So that's class D. That's how you can remember these different classes of airspace. All right, so class A, we just said is top of the class. It's the high altitudes, right? 18,000 feet. You have to be an IFR rated pilot. You have to have an IFR clearance. You have to be on IFR flight plan. You have two-way radio communications. You have to be able to you have to have mode C transponder, and you have to have ADS-B out equipment, and you have to operate within that area with a appropriate radio. Obviously, you have to be communicating. Mach 1 is your speed limit, and then Class A airspace, airplanes fly high and fast, so it's really, really important that they know where they are at. That's why you have to be on an IFR flight plan. What does Class A airspace look like on a chart? Well, it's not. It's not on the chart, right? It's not depicted on any sectional chart because it's everywhere and it's above 18,000 feet. So they don't have to specifically note it. You just have to it's there. So it's everywhere. It's like a giant cloud over the entire area. the entire country. Class B is busy airspace, right? We remember that by busy for B. Class B airspace is from the surface up to 10,000 feet, and that's usually in the center core, right? It's up to 10,000 feet. It surrounds the busiest airports. The airspace is usually has different types of layers. It's almost like an upside down wedding cake. If you were to get a wedding cake, you know, layers, wedding cakes have layers. And you flip that upside down and you would have all those different layers, just like this depiction here on the left, where you see it on the left. That's exactly how it looks. You have two-way radio communication. You got to have it. You got to have that two-way radio communication, and an operating transponder mode C and a ADS-B out. There's also this 30 nautical mile veil, and we'll talk about it in just a minute, where you also have to abide by some specific Class B rules. You must be at least a private pilot. You got to be a private pilot to enter Class B airspace. Now, you can be a student pilot to transition through the airspace, okay? But you need a specific endorsement by your instructor. So that student pilot has to have a specific endorsement, 14 CFR 6195. You got to have that special endorsement, right, to get through that Class B airspace. So, and then most student pilots are not going to land in a Class B airspace. There's certain airports that you're not allowed to. 250 knots is your speed limit. If you're going through the VFR corridor or you're below, your speed limit is actually a little bit lower. It's at 200 knots. So they have those VFR corridors, and then they below, anytime you're below the Class B airspace, your speed limit is 200 knots. And your visibility is 3 statute miles clear of clouds. So 3 statute miles clear of clouds. All right, there's one more special rule in Class B airspace, and I always refer to this as the vampire rule. If you know vampire movies, or if you understand vampire lore, you know that a vampire has to be invited into a place, right? They can't just walk into somewhere. If you want to be protected from a vampire, you go into a building, and then they have to be invited to come inside. Why do I know that? I don't even know. But that's part of the vampire lore. And so what does that mean? That means that when you're approaching a Class B airspace and you need to go through that airspace, or you need to land at a Class B airport, then you actually need to be cleared into that airspace. So it's going to sound something like this. Let's say you're Cessna 330 Mike Echo, and 330 Mike Echo, you are cleared into the Class B airspace. When you hear that from the controller, now you're cleared to pass the threshold and enter into the Class B airspace. However, if they say 330 Mike Echo radar contact, that does not mean you're allowed to enter that airspace. That means they saw you. Great. Hey, I'm acknowledging you, but that doesn't mean you're allowed to come in here. So you're like a vampire. They actually have to say your name and they have to invite you in. So yeah, I don't know. If you don't understand vampires movies, then sorry. All right. So this is what a Class B airspace looks like. It's this blue line. Now let's talk about how we're going to read this Class B map and how we're going to read this area. You have here, if you look here, you have 100 over 80. So that means that in this area here, okay, in this block here, you have the Class B airspace that starts at 800 feet and 10,000 feet. So it goes between these airspaces. So if I fly in this block and I stay below 8,000 feet, I could fly around all day, okay? I could fly around here all day long below 8,000 feet, and I don't have to be cleared to enter the Class B airspace. However, if I am in this airspace and I climb up to 8,500, I am now in the Class B airspace. And because I'm in that Class B airspace, okay, I have to be cleared into that Class B airspace. Got it? So that's what that means, okay? If I am in this area here. Okay, it goes kind of from here to here to here to here, right? 2,000 feet or 10,000 feet. Okay, so this is a lot lower than it is over here. Why? Well, because these airplanes are taking off and they're coming out and they're going out into this direction. This area here has something special. This area says SFC, right? SFC over 10,000. Okay, that means that it's at the surface. So there is no place. There's no place. If you were standing on the beach right here, in Torrance, you were standing on the beach right there, that means that where you're standing is Class B airspace. Okay, you're standing in Class B airspace. So just understand that from the surface up to 10,000 feet is Class B airspace. Okay, so that's how that works, and that's how you read that on the map. Mode C transponder, when you're in the Mode C veil, that's this here, you can kind of see it wrapping around, right? You can see it in that. And you need your Mode C, you need your ADS-B, and so that's in that 30 nautical miles. And it's basically from the surface up into 10,000 feet. So you need that Mode C and that transponder in that 30 nautical mile veil, okay? So you've got to have those things in order to operate in that area. Class B airspace, usually shaped like multiple layers. We'd already talked about that. And this is, we talked about what it looks like basically. Class Charlie airspace. Let's talk about Class Charlie airspace. So Class Charlie airspace, it's usually 5 nautical mile radius. It extends from the surface up to 4,000 feet. Typically, sometimes it could be different. A second shelf is outward from that, and it's 10 nautical mile radius, and that's usually from like 1,200 up to 4,000 feet. Operating control towers are serviced by radar approach controls. So these are being serviced by some type of radar. It has a certain number of IFR operations. It definitely has IFR operations because these airports are kind of like, John Wayne, these are kind of airports that have a little bit more, there's more traffic in it. There's commercial traffic that comes in and out. So it's not quite as busy as a Class B airspace, but there still needs to be a lot of restrictions to these airspace in order to keep things safe. You need two-way radio communication, and you need to have ATC clearance to enter. But this is a little bit different. They can just say your tail number, and that's it. Once they say your tail number, you're cleared to come in. They don't have to specifically say cleared to enter the Class Charlie airspace. So it could sound something like this. It could sound like John Wayne Tower, Cessna 330 Mike Echo, over Huntington Beach, requesting to transition your airspace or requesting to land at John Wayne, right? Inbound for landing John Wayne, right? All they have to do is say 330 Mike Echo radar contact. And if they say that, that's it. I can come in now. Like I can continue in. And so that's one of the important things. So I don't have to be specifically asked to come in. Unless otherwise authorized by ATC, an operating radar beacon transponder and altitude reporting equipment is required. So you got to have that. Two-way radio communication, ADS-B, got to have it. What's our weather minimums? Well, 3 statute miles and 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, and 2,000 feet horizontally. So how do we remember this? We remember it as 3 Cessna 152s, right? 3 Cessna 152s, that's the best way to remember it, right? Cessna 152 is like one of the most common trainer aircraft on the market. So you always remember 3 Cessna 152, 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 horizontally. 1,000 above, 500 below, 2,000 feet horizontally. Okay, that's the way to remember it. Right? It's the best way to do it. You're going to remember it. It's easy. Here's what it looks like on your chart. You have that magenta line that wraps around. This is a John Wayne Airport, right? It wraps around that John Wayne Airport, and it's easy to see in that magenta area. You can see these different shelves. It's different shelf here, shelf here, shelf here, shelf, 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 and shelf. So all of these are different. You could see closest to the airport, you have SFC, and we talked about that already. That surface up to 4,400 feet. Okay. Out over the ocean, once again, you have 1,500 feet up to 5,400 feet. So you can see all these different areas, right? They're identified and they are specific to those regions. Okay. All right. That's what it looks like, Class Charlie, like we said. We already discussed this, but basically that's what it looks like on some of the different charts. And then you have that depiction there of the upside down wedding cake. Class D, D is for donut because it's round typically. Normally extends from the surface up to 2,500 feet AGL. Above ground level. And then Class Delta surrounds airports with an operating control tower and weather services. So two-way radio communications, two-way radio comms must be established and maintained with ATC before entering. And then when departing for a non-tower satellite airport, Class D airspace, pilots must establish two-way radio communications, and maintain two-way radio communications, the primary airport. So if you have to travel through that airspace in order to land at another airport in that veil or in that area, you have to maintain two-way radio communications. When part-time control towers, when it goes from a Class Delta airspace, if that control tower closes, let's say at 9 o'clock, just like Fullerton, that control tower closes, then that airspace is going to revert to a Class E airspace. And we'll talk about Class E airspace in a minute, but basically it turns into a Class E airspace in that environment. Okay, within that veil. Weather minimums, once again, we're talking about Cessna 1-3, Cessna 1-3, Cessna 152s. So 3 Cessna 152s. Okay. What does that mean? That means 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, 2,000 feet horizontally. 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, 2,000 feet horizontally. That's Cessna 3 152s. 3 Cessna 152s. All right. How can I remember Class D? Because it looks like a donut. It's nice and round. This is an interesting statement here. We see this here, right? Up to but not including. Up to but not including, because that minus. That means that that airspace comes all the way up to 3,000 feet, but it doesn't include 3,000 feet. Why? Well, because there's another airspace above that Class Delta airspace, and it's right here. That airspace starts at 3,000 feet. So this comes up to, but not including 3,000 feet. And then the Class Bravo airspace has precedence over the airspace above it at 3,000 feet. And it goes all the way up to 8,000 feet. And there it is again. That's kind of what it looks like. It's a depiction of the way it looks. So 4 nautical mile radius. All right. So let's talk about airspeeds. 91,117 gives us the airspeed. So the first thing we're talking about is anything below 10,000 feet. That airspeed limit is going to be 250 knots. And that indicates airspace and indicated airspace. So, or airspeed, sorry about that. So below 10,000 feet, we're talking about 250 knots. Class B airspace, we talked this earlier, but it's 250 knots in a Class B airspace. Below that Class B airspace, we're talking about 200 knots. And then in a corridor, in that corridor of that Class B airspace, once again, you're talking about 200 knots. Okay. We haven't really talked about Class E airspace, but that's 200 knots in Class E airspace. Okay. Okay, cool. Unless otherwise authorized or required by ATC, no person may operate an aircraft at or below 2,500 feet within 4 nautical miles of a primary airspace, Class C or D airspace area, and intended airspeed more than 200 knots. So I know you don't see it, I'm in the way of it, but no more than 200 knots when you're within that, basically that airport environment, right? Okay, so yeah, that's 200 knots. So I'll write it in here, 200. Cool. All right. Next slide. ADS-B, when do we need our ADS-B equipment? These are in all the areas that you need ADS-B. You need it in that, gosh, I can't even speak right now. You need it in Class A airspace. You need it in Class B and C airspace. And you need it within that Mode C veil, okay? And you need it 12 nautical miles off the coastline from 3,000 feet up to 10,000 feet. And then you need ADS-B from 10,000 feet up. So why this ADS-B? What is, automatic dependency surveillance broadcast? It's basically using GPS to provide information regarding our location, and that's important because then that allows greater separation of aircraft. So it helps with separation of aircraft. So very, very helpful. I think it was like 2000 when that became mandatory. And then lateral extensions of the floor, talking about airspace, it must be described in terms of lateral extension. So from the floor up. So we're talking about from the floor up, right? So that's important. So you have all those airspaces from the floor up. Now we're going to be talking about Class E and Class G. Okay, Class E airspace, when we talk about Class E airspace, it's kind of everywhere, and Class G airspace is underlying or that uncontrolled airspace. Class E airspace is still controlled, and we're going to talk about the different categories of those two airspaces now. So we're now getting into Class E and G. So the bottom of Class E has a solid number, and that can be anywhere between 700, 1,200, or 14,500 MSL. Okay, so 700 AGL, 1,200 AGL, or 14,500 MSL. Okay, and we need to look at our chart key to identify what that means and where things are. And we just want to identify the fact that on the inside of the magenta line, that light colored inside of the magenta line, that airspace starts at 700 feet. So that Class G airspace comes all the way up to 700 feet AGL on the light side or the inside of the magenta line. So there it is, Class C airspace areas designation from the airports where a control tower is not in operation and for non-towered operations. So in this specific area, you have that dotted area, right? That dotted area, and that's indicating that Class E airspace goes all the way to the surface, okay? So Class E airspace goes all the way down to the surface. So there is no specific Class G airspace. So that just indicates it's going down to the surface. All right. But this is a little bit different. Class E airspace in this depiction, you have that magenta line, right? You have that shaded vignette, and that shaded vignette that indicates that Class E airspace, or I'm sorry, Class G airspace goes from the surface up to 700 feet. So that uncontrolled airspace comes from the surface up to 700 feet, and then it starts at 700 feet up. Why is that the case, and why is it, for example, this one's shaped like a key? Well, what we need to know is that Class E airspace is there to separate IFR and VFR traffic. So what does that mean? That most likely means that there is a IFR approach that comes in this way and then lands here. Okay, so most likely there is some form of instrument approach that's coming through here and landing here. Okay, that's what it tells me because I could see that, and they want that Class E airspace to start at 700 feet. So that's pretty much what it's telling me. Now, because the blue vignette, and this is very hard to find. This is the only one that I'm able to find. It's like out in New Mexico somewhere. Because the blue vignette faces outside of the entire U.S., Class E airspace that starts at 12,000 feet AGL unless there is another airspace in line, right? Um, so kind of understanding what is the blue vignette and what's going on there. The inside of that blue vignette goes from the surface. Class G airspace goes from the surface all the way up to 14,499 feet. That's Class G airspace. Class E airspace starts at 15,500, or I'm sorry, 14,500. So in this blue vignette, the Class G airspace starts from the surface to 14,499 MSL. Class E airspace starts above that at 15,000 or at 14,500. Okay. And so understanding that the area that is around that, if you have any other vignette, it abuts against that. And that, just like it states here, that starts at 1,200 feet. So that's Class E airspace. This is very rare. You don't see this very often. Okay. Very, very rare. Where else do we see this? Class G airspace goes up to, but does not include that altitude from the surface to 1,199. So we have 1,200 feet. Basically, it goes up to that altitude, and then it's Class E airspace above that. Why is that the case? That's because we need that area off the coastline to be protected. We really want to know who's flying in and out of there, so that needs to be Class Echo airspace in order to identify the aircraft. You know, I mean, the national security is a little bit concerned about any aircraft that's like 12 nautical miles off our coastline, above 12,000 or 1,200 feet. We kind of want to know about that. So that's why that's there. You'll see that little gate pretty much around the entire east and west coast of California, you know, the east coast of the United States and the west coast of the United States. Victor Airways have a separation there, Class E airspace, basically from 1,200 feet up to 18,000 feet and 4 nautical miles on either end. That's that Class E airspace protected. Once again, that's a Victor Airways for IFR operations, and that's basically like highways in the sky. So we need it protected. So Class E clearance requirements, Class E VFR requirements under 10,000 feet, 3 statute miles, 152s. So there it is, 3 Cessna 3 152s in Class E, basically from the surface up to 10,000 feet. And then Class E VFR requirements above 10,000 feet. So now you get above 10,000 feet and you have a clearance of 5 statute miles, 1,000 above, 1,000 below, and 1 nautical miles horizontally. Okay. Why is that the case? Well, above 10,000 feet, airplanes are moving faster, and so we need more visual separation. We need more visual separation, pretty much. So what does that look like? You have your cloud here, 1,000 feet, 1,000 feet, 1 mile. Okay. So that looks like a 4. There we go. That's better. Okay. So 1,000, 1,000 and 1 mile. So why is that horizontal distance so far away from the cloud? Because those airplanes are moving really fast. They come pumping out of that cloud really fast. You're only going to have a few seconds to move out of the way. So you want to make sure you have enough time. And 1 mile is going to give you enough time, but still pretty tight. So you might want to give yourself 2 miles, a little more extra time. In Class G airspace, ATC has no authority and responsibility to control air traffic. So there are visual flight rules, VFR minimums also in that airspace though. So just because it doesn't have, just because there's no controllability or control, there's still some rules. Here's that famous triangle that you've already remembered. Class G airspace during the nighttime is 3 152s at night. Class G airspace during the daytime is 1 statute mile and then 152s, right? and that's from 12,000 feet up to 10,000 feet. And then from 12,000 feet down, Class G during the day is 1 statute mile clear clouds. Now, why is that? Usually that has to do with just doing, practicing takeoff and landings in the vicinity of an airport. I was training to get my tailwheel endorsement. I was flying a Piper Cub. It was like a really crappy weather day. I called my instructor. I said, I don't know. I don't think this is going to happen. He's like, no, come on down. The weather's fine. And I'm thinking, wow, it's really, the weather's, where I'm at, it doesn't look great. So I drove over there. A Piper Cub is going to stay within a half mile from the airport. And when you're doing your traffic pattern, you're not getting very high. And the weather was probably, it was not great, but we were able to safely operate in that traffic pattern because we were in a very small airplane. So yeah, it makes sense when it's things like that. And then, and so we kind of understand that Class G airspace. So yeah. Special VFR weather minimums 91 157 FAR 191 157. It basically states that 1 statute mile visibility clear clouds is for special VFR. You have to request this with ATC clearance and is available only in controlled airspace. So it only is available in controlled airspace designated for an airport. So the idea is basically you're either getting in or getting out of an airport, and you're going to clear skies quickly. So you're not going to be flying IFR. You're asking to just kind of get into a position where you can use these special rules to get out of the area. You cannot be a student pilot and request special VFR. You have to be an IFR rated pilot. So it's fine. You can totally ask to do that. There are a couple times in the morning where I'm taking off out of Fullerton. Maybe I'm heading towards Riverside, and I could clearly see, but I need to get a little bit closer to a cloud. I need to get a little bit closer to a cloud in order to get out, but I can stay below this like very stable layer of clouds. And so I might ask for that special VFR, not because my visibility is bad. My visibility is fine. I could probably see 30, 40 miles, but it's that 152, right? 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, and 1,000 feet horizontally. I might want to get a little bit closer to that cloud. And so I asked for that special VFR, and that allows me to get closer than that 152. VFR minimums are exactly that. These are minimums and they should be understood. You have to understand your local weather and then understand when you should or should not go. Understand your topography, the time of day, and the proximity of the ocean. Things like that. You should know your weather, local weather, well if you're going to be requesting special VFR. If I was flying in a new location, I've flown in the Orange County area since I was very young. And so I kind of have an understanding. I'm not going to say I understand everything. Weather can still sneak up on you, but I have a much better understanding of the weather here. If I was in Florida or somewhere back east, I would not attempt special VFR because I don't have a great understanding for that local weather. And so I wouldn't want anything to sneak up on me. So special VFR for places where you really understand. But if you're in a new place, don't accept that. Regulatory versus non-regulatory. Regulatory is airspace is like A, B, C, D, E, G. Restricted, prohibited. Those are regulatory airspace. And then non-regulatory airspace. These are airspaces that include primarily that which is advisory in nature. So these are advisory type of airspaces, military operation areas, warning areas, alert areas, and controlled firing areas. Special use airspace, restricted and prohibited. Restricted airspace is sometimes closed to pilots and may be scheduled or the time specific. So NOTAMs will be very specific to that. Prohibited airspace is always closed to pilots. So just understand that if it states that it's prohibited areas, it is always closed to those pilots. Military operation areas or MOAs, entry is allowed without permission, but should be avoided if the MOA is active. So if that MOA is active, you're going to avoid that. Right. Alert warning areas, controlled firing areas. Well, I don't want to go in there. Entry is allowed without permission, but should be avoided. Yeah, I'm going to avoid any place that's called a control firing area. I don't think my regular passengers would appreciate me entering a place like that. So we're going to go ahead and avoid that. A go and no-go decision, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is prohibited areas. That's a no-go, right? You do not enter those prohibited areas. Restricted areas, those are not, no approval. Or I'm sorry, you should not go into restricted area, or you would have to do that with specific approval. And then warning areas, you can enter a warning area, but with caution. Alert areas, you can enter an alert area. And then your military operation area, yes, but with caution. So you can enter a MOA, but with caution. So those are the goes and the no goes, right? Where do you find the information? Where you find it in the chart supplement or the chart on the actual physical chart on the back side of it, and you're going to go ahead and find all that information there. You'll see the certain location. It'll have you have the reference number. For example, here's the reference number right here, R2503B and C, and we have R2503B, R5023C. And what does it say? Altitude to 1,500 feet. So this is from the surface up to 1,500 feet, from 6 to 2,400 hours, Los Angeles, and then it has a frequency that you can call. But basically, that whole area, this whole area is restricted basically from the ground up to 1,500 feet. I mean, I could call on the frequency and see if it's active, but just go around it. It's Camp Pendleton, so I don't want to mess around with Marines. Not something I feel like doing. Warning areas, you have these warning areas that are off the coastline. Warning areas that's airspace. Defined dimensions extend from 3 nautical miles outward. And the United States may have a hazardous or non-participating aircraft. So this is off of Point Mugu Naval Air Base. So they have heavy aircraft that operate in and out of there. So I want to kind of stay out of that area. All right. Temporary flight restrictions. What is a TFR or temporary flight restrictions? Basically, it's any location. It could be like a presidential TFR, special flight operations. It could be sporting events or air shows. Like there's one right now. The Pacific Air Show is going on right now. But due to the government shutdown, there's no Air Force planes, and the Thunderbirds are not flying this weekend. So that's really sad. Super sad. A lot of disappointed people. So, and then you have and then you have things like fires or destructive this desert. You have hazardous areas from fires or any kind of anything like that, and they're gonna impose that airspace. ForeFlight will update TFRs. However, if you do not have access, do not be afraid to talk to a human. What human do you talk to? Like, who do you call? Like, I don't know. Do you go somewhere and talk to somebody? No. You call 1-800-WX-BRIEF. Yep, that's right. You talk to a human and you let them know, hey, just call. It's really easy. Hey, this is the pilot of Cessna 330 Mike Echo. I am doing a flight lesson, so I need a local weather briefing, abbreviated weather briefing, and any NOTAMs, any TFRs in the area of Los Angeles or Orange County. Cool. You know what they're going to do? They're going to give you a little briefing, right? They're going to tell you, hey, weather looks great. You should have moderate turbulence above 7,000 feet, but you're not going up there, so great. You should low-lying clouds later in the evening, and you have a TFR located over Disneyland, and there is a temporary, and they'll give you the start and the end time, and then there's a TFR over Angel Stadium due to a baseball game that starts, at a certain time. So they're going to give you all that on 1-800-WX-BRIEF. So it's cool. Try it one day. See what happens. You talk to a human. You're not going to die. Okay, so that's what it looks like on your ForeFlight. Gives you that TFR, gives you the start date, time, and it gives you the specific, this from the surface to 3,000 feet. So. Military operation areas, magenta hatched border, usually named. It's usually named. So this one is like the Platka MOA. And so it has like a specific name, right? It's on the sectional chart, large areas. You could see like once you get to the once you get out to the desert, you're going to see giant military operation areas that take up huge amounts of area. Restricted prohibited areas, those are blue hatched borders named R or P. Okay. And then there's some number near it. Altitudes and controlling agencies are specific in the sectional chart legend. So you can, or specified in the sectional chart legend. So you can go in the sectional chart legend and see what you need, just like we talked about in the military operation areas. Alert areas, those are usually in the magenta hatched border named A, and then there's a certain name to it, or number, I'm sorry. Usually caution notes are provided. So give a little note on what's going on. So like this one here, A293, right above me, right there. Training from the surface up to 4,000 feet MSL, right? And then not depicted on the sectional charts due to temporary nature are the TFRs. So if you get a sectional chart, you're not going to see a TFR. So you have to either get those through 1-800-WX brief, or you have to have an electronic flight bag, or you can go on the computer and check too. So military operation areas, MOA separates non-military participating aircraft IFR traffic from military flight activities. So that's what it's doing, separating aircraft activities. You have your IR and VR routes. You have a 4-digit number if it is below 15,000 feet AGL, and three-digit number if it's above 15,000 feet AGL. So, and then IRs stand for instrument route, and then VR stands for visual route. So these are just areas where these jets are moving from place to place, and they're usually flying pretty fast. So they kind of want you to like not really be in that area too much. And then these are prohibited areas, usually for like wildlife or national parks. Sorry about that. I'm getting tired. It's getting late. 2,000 feet above the wildlife areas is typical. And that's a airman information manual, so it's like that's kind of like expected of you. It's not, it's something that's expected. So you want to stay above 2,000 feet. Wildlife areas. Terminal radar service areas are TARS, terminal radar service areas. These are areas that are specific that need radar service. Usually it has to do with topography. If you look in this area, and if you've ever flown in this area, you have a giant mountain range here, and then you have a range here. This, and then you have another mountain range here. This is kind of like a pass, it's like a valley pass. This is Palm Springs. Palm Springs, beautiful place. I love it. It's super nice. A lot of golfing, a lot of it's fun out there. Weather's great in the spring. So it gets busy. It gets super busy. This airport, Palm Springs International Airport, gets really busy. But look at all this topography that kind of blocks in any of the radar services that are in Riverside County. And so they made a specific terminal radar service area right here in this little pocket so that area can have radar services. If you would like radar services, they are available, but it's not mandatory. So it's just like any other place. You can go in, it's like Orange County or LA. Well, LA County is different, but if you want radar services and you want flight following, go ahead and get it. Currency and publication of aeronautical charts, terminal procedure publications, TPPs, every 28 days. All VFR sectional charts are every 56 days update, and chart supplements are every 56 days. If you have your electronic flight bag and you're staying up to speed on your updates, all you have to do is press a button, boop, and you get it. Just be glad you're not in the old days. When I first became an instrument pilot, we had charts that were mailed to you every single month, and you had to replace those charts in your binder. It was a cool leather binder. It looked really cool. When you were an instrument pilot, if you had one of those cool leather binders, that means you were an instrument pilot and you were awesome. But you had to replace those paper charts once a month. Not all of them, but they'd send them to you and you would replace them. It was not fun. It was not fun at all. All right, pop quiz, hot shot. So let's talk about it. If you are an aircraft and you are flying here, okay, you're flying here, you just took off and you're flying here and you are at 2,000 feet. Okay, what airspace are you in? So what airspace are you in at 2,000 feet? And your answer is Delta, right? So you are in Class D airspace. It's round like a donut. You kind of see it around that um, Du Bois International or Du Bois Regional Airport, K Delta Bravo Quebec, and you are at 2,000 feet, and so you are in a Class Delta airspace. So cool, awesome. Let's say you're flying here from the south, and you're flying in this direction. Okay, you're flying in this direction, and you come across, and you're just right here. Okay, and you are, um, let's say you're at 1,000 feet inbound for Du Bois, right? So you're at 1,000 feet and you're right there. So you are as a dotted line. So that means that Class Echo airspace goes from the surface up to well, on the inside of the magenta line up to 700 feet, right? So it goes from the surface up to 700 feet. And so you are in a Class Echo airspace. So you're in Class Echo airspace. Okay. You're out here, you're flying over here, okay, and let's say you're at 4,000 feet out here, okay, then you are in Class Echo airspace. But let's say you're out here and let's say you're right here and you're at 1,100 feet and you're just flying along the river. If you're at 1,100 feet, you are then in Class Gulf right? Because out here, that's Class G all the way up to 1,200 feet. Cool. All right. So that's some quiz there. So let's see if we're correct. So good. So it looks like we're right. So our 4 spots were here, 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 and here. This was, I think we said 2,000 feet. Okay. And so we agreed we were in Class Delta. This we said we were, I forget whatever we said we were at. Gosh, I don't remember. I think we said we were at like, I don't remember what we said, 1,500 maybe. I don't remember. But yes, we're definitely in Class E because that Class E, it's dotted, so we know it goes from the surface up. Out here, we said we were in Class Gulf airspace. This was 1,100 feet. And so we said that was Class G because 1,200 feet. And then this one we said we were at, I don't remember, we said we were at 15,000 feet or something like that. And we said we were in Class E airspace. So yeah, so good. All right. Let's see. And we'll use that one next time. Cool. I think that's it. All right, you guys. So just wrapping it up, we're going to go over those questions when we meet. I'm going to ask you those questions during your lesson to see how you do with some of those questions. We're going to go over, we're going to sectional chart, a local one of Fullerton area so we know where we're at. I'm going to ask you some of those cloud clearances and where you're at and what kind of radio communication, what equipment you need, and that way you're ready for your check ride, and you're going to have all those great questions that you're going to be practicing with. So, all right, hope you had a good time, and we will see you out there. Take it easy.